Hello again, and now we're going to talk about stage 5 of the K-20 plan's logic model process. This is the stage where we begin defining the outputs that relate specifically to the parts of the activity design. So you can see I went ahead and added a second activity so that I could show you how you add those outputs directly to an individual activity. And then when you get in here, you will see that the tabs are similar by phases of the process. So you can add an output to design specifically, to develop specifically. And there's some examples up here of the kinds of things that might be outputs for that phase. So we like to, it's important to distinguish between outputs and outcomes, and we'll talk about outcomes next, but outputs are measurable ways to measure the implementation of an activity, its fidelity, how well it worked, some things you can look at and analyze that can give you clues as to those factors. So in the design stage for the ACT Prep Club activity, we would have things like objectives, and then in the develop phase, we would have some like learning strategies, practice exams developed. We want realistic practice exams according to the research. And then in implementation, we're going to have things such as the number of students who register for the club, the number of students who complete 50% of the online resources, number of students who attend 50% of the sessions. Really specific about attendance. That's butts and seats. And then perhaps the number of sessions that are successfully held to completion is another one. So there may be barriers that we see through measuring this that tell us about how we might schedule them better in the future so that we can hold all the ones that we plan to hold. And then in evaluate, we want to, these are actions taken by the attendees. So for evaluation, it would be like number of students who took the ACT, number of students who increase their composite score, or subtest score is probably what we're really looking at here. In English, number of students who increase their subtest score in math, that sort of thing. And then we can save, and we'll get our little table of our outputs and which phases they belong in. Another thing here is I said practice exams. It would be helpful to say number of practice exams created or number of learning strategies created during that development phase for preparing students. And then we go on to outcomes. And these are broken into intermediate and long-term. And these are things you can measure that are beyond the activity. They're not tied into that specific activity, but they are a result of it in the future. And we're just talking about intermediate future and long-term future. So an intermediate outcome might be the percent of students who would require remedial coursework. And ideally we see that go down as a result of these activities we've implemented. And the percent of, or actually the number of the points, so 0.4 points increase in student scores. It's not quite the 2 we want to have as our eventual goal, but that's like an intermediate point we'd like to see reached. And then we'd also like to see an increase in the number of times a student takes the ACT exam, right? And then we save and continue, and we get our long term that we can enter here, which we would like to see a decrease in number of students taking remedial coursework, and an increase, something that might be a nice side effect in the long run, in student scholarship opportunities, and an increase in students who are academically prepared for post-secondary education coursework. So those are some examples of the outcomes. Once you hit finish, you will have your complete logic model, and our next video will talk about how you can enter some of the actual data, whereas these are goals we've set for intermediate and long-term outcomes. We can enter some actual data that will show where we are in terms of our progress in meeting those goals.